Happy Tuesday, Revealing Truth Ministries family and friends. Welcome to this Tuesday Deeper Dive Live. We are live in the month of June. And as you can see, our senior pastor, our very own senior pastor, Pastor Bryan, is here in the building
Yes, sir.
with us, ready to take a deeper dive. Welcome to the stream. As you come in, go ahead and greet those who are in the chat with you. Let them know that you're excited about being here with them. Share the stream, like the stream, and I hope you are excited about hearing some truths as we spring forward from Sunday's message. As we walk through Romans chapter 6. Man, ain't it good to see Pastor Bryan? Give him some love in the chat. Give him some love in the chat. They shout you out, Pastor
You guys
Bryan.
know I love the waves. So, put some waves
Drop
in the
some
chat.
waves in the chat.
Wave after wave of good news.
Yes.
That the grace of God is exceedingly abundantly above all we can think, ask, or imagine. Every once in a while, someone asks me what the waves mean. I tell them, it symbolizes the goodness of God, like waves on the beach. Have you ever seen the waves stop? Never seen the waves stop.
Never.
And that is our expectation of experiencing the goodness of God, the grace of God, like waves on the beach, wave after wave until we overflow.
Yes, wave after wave. We've got some Tuesday regulars who are in the chat. Good afternoon, everybody. Brother Scott, William Scott, Amanda Grace, Brother Calloway, Coach Metris is in the chat. Miss Julia Jackson, Miss Joselle, Miss Carlisa, my mama's in the chat.
Yeah.
So welcome, everybody. Welcome to this deeper dive. You know what we do here? When we attend to the things that God said, we are most blessed. And we're stirring up a community around that principle. So we're here ready to take a deeper dive into Romans chapter 6 from Sunday's message. Message title. The message title.
Spiritual
formation. Spiritual formation. And today I think we're going to dive deep into some content covering sin and what sin. What does that look like? That little 3-letter word that's so big, right? Sin today in this dispensation of grace. So with that being said, let's get in it.
Let's go.
While we're in Romans chapter 6, and we know that Paul's letter to this group of believers in Rome was to introduce grace, introduce the message that he carried, and he's definitely doing what he felt he was responsible for. And throughout the letter, it's like, listen, yes, I know that you've heard about Christ and you've heard about this new life that he brought, and as we all grapple with this new life, let me insert this truth.
Yeah.
And here we are. And the unique thing about this church in Rome is that it's a makeup of both Jew and Gentile, right? Yeah. And there's some things that Paul says to bring the two groups together. Yeah. And you hit on that a few weeks ago. I think it was when we were walking through chapter 2 and chapter 3, how though these two groups are very different, Paul is bringing them to some common place, letting them know that nobody's got the advantage over another group. Let's learn how to live this thing together. So something that we all work through, deal with, something we all have to grapple with, something that's universal to this walk is the idea of sin, right? Yep. And then something that we all benefit from, all of us benefit from, is grace, right? Yeah. And we're still learning how to bring those two together.
Yeah. I think there's a powerful statement, right? Not my statement. I read this statement, but I think it's powerful, is grace doesn't make sin safe. It makes restoration possible.
That's a good one. Grace doesn't make sin safe.
This is important because, as we've been talking about, Paul is doing an amazing job at deciphering and showing people and telling people not only what the grace of God is, but how to live by it.
Right.
And if there's one thing that I know impacts every believer's walk, every person's walk, is the decisions you make. And everybody just wants clarity.
Right.
We want to do ultimately what's pleasing to God, and we want to do it in a way that we know is most pleasing to God.
That's good.
And it's like, if I just gained some clarity, had some understanding, now hearing this message of grace of what do I now do with the things that I know, sin, of course, being something that's displeasing to God, it will truly help me walk with confidence. It'll help me live boldly. And unfortunately, I believe, and it hasn't been a very clear subject of how grace has impacted sin, or how we view sin now that grace has been made available. And so we're diving into it. Why? Because Paul dove into it, right?
And we still need it. You know, when you're going through that, one of the things that make life or those decisions fuzzy is dealing with, and I think this is something that the majority of us deal with. There's only a small percentage of people who just in their natural way of doing things, they just get through this. But I think the majority of us deal with what resonates on the inside of me isn't necessarily matching or aligning with all of the information or instruction on the outside of me. Like, I got a feeling of knowing how to take the steps forward, but the feeling I have doesn't line up with what you're telling me to do. And that disturbs clarity. Now I'm great.
And I believe it's a good point of disturbance, because I believe the disturbance is truly coming from a place of realizing I don't want to just be a recipient of this grace. I want to be a distributor of it. And so as much as I could rest in the peace I have, truthfully, as a disciple, as a disciple maker, I'm not at peace until I can communicate what I have received.
That's good.
And I would say that is where a lot of people's peace is not at. They know from their relationship how to address it. However, when it gets into a group setting, when they're talking believer to believer, you can hear the missteps. You can feel the missteps, because we've yet to hear verbiage that helps us connect the dots on a subject that impacts all. And so when we lack that, we last week we talked about being a master builder for God, right? Anyone who wants to build on this foundation has to build according to Christ. So we know we're supposed to be wise builders. We know we're supposed to be building, speaking for God, proclaiming boldly. Well, man, if I don't have verbiage, I don't have understanding that I can speak boldly about, then man, that impacts my witness.
That's good.
And so how can I be at peace, even though I know what I know, if I know I'm not being a witness with what I know? Ooh. And so it's that's where we are. And you know, we're diving in so that we can be. I mean, just think about, Paul had received this grace,
right?
But now he has to be a wise, skillful builder.
That's good.
With what he has,
right?
And there, he wasn't the only one who had received it, right? Like there, he was discipling people. I mean, all of Jesus's disciples were recipients of it, right? But but Paul, he could communicate what he had received. You know, and I believe that's that mark, right?
Paul masterfully communicates what he's received, and oftentimes he is connecting with what you should already know. Right? Or what you already know. Or trying to make the connection at what you experience, and then building on top of what you've already experienced. As you're talking, it's reminded me of something that was stated in the most recent Till Death Do Us Part podcast.
Yes, sir.
Dropped Sunday night.
Yes,
right?
Sir.
I'm gonna put the link in the chat. If you haven't watched it, you can check it out.
Masterclass.
Pastor Tony Brazelton was describing just the process of how he and Miss Cynthia got together, got married, and he shared something that I think fits this conversation. He says he heard God say that Pastor Cynthia was his wife. Yeah. But then he heard other people say that she wasn't. Yeah. And whereas when he heard God say, he was clear. But then when he heard what other people had to say, it became cloudy. Yep. And it slowed down his moving forward. Yeah. And I think that fits into this conversation, even about sin or about missing the mark that God has called you to.
Yes. And that is, and you know me, I love to normalize the room. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by that? Is identify what are justifiable challenges, right? Like sometimes we act like challenges are unjustified, but no, there's some challenges that are justified. They are rightfully presenting themselves, and I would say that this is a rightful challenge. This is a justifiable challenge that it should not be easy. Right. It's not going to be easy to make clear this mystery. And I use mystery even specifically, right? Because as long as Satan can create a cloud around this subject, people are left to deception. And so we're asking and we're pursuing to climb a mountain. We're asking to God, give us revelation so that we can be wise as serpent, gentle as doves. Like we want to communicate on your behalf, but this is not something that is simple. This is a challenge that is worth taking on. And so I say this to say, like, we can't think that we're just going to simply be able to get out of this one. Why? Because just like Pastor Tony, man, you got people who you value, who may be saying something, right, that you're like, I can't just easily dismiss, right, you know, what they're saying. I'm gonna have to bring that to the table and see, okay, God, how does it? So we're having to take it all in, right? Because it's not as clear as other subjects may be, right? And I say that because anytime we're messing around with man's agenda, with Satan's agenda, and you're taking it on, face on, that is spiritual warfare. That if you can be clear as it concerns sin in a grace dispensation, oh snap. Right. You talking about setting some people free. Right. You talking about freedom. And so that's why we have to take it on. That's why we have to dive in. That's why we have to own it and just keep going.
That's good. Good. I want to point out that first, just the people that we're talking to. You're talking to people who are leaders in their own right, people who have influence over other people. But no matter if you're saved and you're listening, then all of us have a responsibility to communicate the grace of God, right? Absolutely. All of us have a responsibility to communicate the grace of God. All of us then should have a desire to be skillful in communicating the grace of God. So there are things that will be shared during this time that we can all take note of, to pray about, to wrestle with, so that we're all more skillful in communicating the grace of God. And for many people, it'll be a help as you process what grace has done in your life and how grace has affected you. Yeah.
And so where do we start, right? Two things, now you got to now lay the foundation to begin this conversation. And one of the things we talked about, and that's where the title message came from. And I was like, man, God, I want to give a title to this message that is doing what you want to do, that is not distracting, that is very plain, very clear. And that's where I landed in peace with spiritual formation. Because if you can understand what God is doing, if you can understand what God is doing, then it's already a part of our slogan, our motto of the Deeper Dive podcast is when
Right.
we attend to what God
God's
is
saying.
saying, we are
Right.
most blessed. Like, so
Right.
when we can see what God is saying, we see
Right.
what God is doing,
Right.
we will be most blessed.
Mhm.
And so, God, what are you doing? Spiritual formation. I am building a house for myself.
That's good.
That's first of all, you understand what God is doing. Then we can start to get why Satan attacks the way he is, because you understand what God is building. And so we start with that Philippians 1:6, for I'm confident of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will complete it by the day of Jesus Christ. And that's letting us know, just that we are in process. We are in process. We're a work in process. But God is the one who's doing the work. That he started this. He called you. He pulled you out, which means so much, right? Because that's even in the tail end of Romans chapter 5, where Paul starts to ground some of the grace message through talking about he came right on time. It was perfect timing that he came and chose you. Why is he saying this? So that you would understand that before you ever did anything good, he called you, right? And when you start there, it's hard for sin to have a chokehold.
Right. Even
some of the things you may have heard that sin does, or may do or could do, you have to start to say, well, wait a minute. He chose me right on time. He snatched me out of darkness. He knew where I was and who I was. Before I had a chance to do any good, he already was good. And so this good work that he's talking about, it can't be planted in my effort. And if it's not planted in my effort, if my effort couldn't form, how can my effort take it away? But you also got to see that Paul is so wise that he's using the same pattern. There's actually a pattern Paul is using, right? That he's saying, first, he's saying, listen, there was the one sin, and that caused all to be judged. So one's righteousness can cause all righteousness. He's using a technique of understanding of where you're seeing one represent all, where you're seeing absolutes, where you're seeing something that is not gray in communication, that one represents all, one does all. And so he's the same pattern is so that you can be in that pattern. So when you say, man, I chose salvation, you can see it as all encompassing. That you're seeing one Adam was one way, then we had a second Adam. We're seeing, just these comparables that are putting one person, one decision, and giving qualification to all. Right. And so he's wanting to set that tone of like, if God chose you, that's absolute.
That's good. Right.
Like there's no unchoosing you. Like you don't see that pattern anywhere. You don't see that one of the ways that even we know scripture that tells us, man, whom God has blessed, man cannot curse.
Right.
We're seeing a pattern of God's reputation. We're seeing that the gifts of God's, they're irrevocable. We're seeing a God who does not change. He's a just God, the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so he's wanting us to take these patterns to form God's identity and set it in stone, and then start applying it to ourselves. So he who began a good work in you is faithful. That's all I see about God.
Right.
And so, okay, when someone comes to me and said, well, man, sin has disrupted you and God, you say, well, whoa, that's interesting.
Right. That doesn't fit the pattern.
That don't fit the pattern.
Right.
Like, where, show me where a man's decision changed God's agenda.
Right.
Show me.
Yeah.
And that's the part where it's starting there, right? And
I think it's so interesting how we develop these church sayings that become cliche, and we say it without even really giving it thought or considering where it came from, right? Because we define sin. We say that sin separates you from God. That's a common church saying, but we say it and we don't even consider is that right? Like,
Right,
what's the
'cause-
full story
right.
there? That needs a lot more context.
Right. First of all, you give me, so we're reading scripture that says nothing can separate you from the love of God.
Right.
So immediately my mind is a little gray because you said sin separated me from God.
Right.
Well, I thought nothing could separate me from God. So right there.
Right.
Help me. Right. Like
Unpack
and
that. Right.
unpack it, right? And that's where I believe God just want to see. Well, first you got to understand, what is God doing? What is God doing? What is happening? And God is building a spiritual house. You were in process, spiritual formation. God is forming you into the image of Christ. What is this work that he's doing? He's doing a work in you, creating you into the image of Christ. Ephesians 2:10, we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we could walk in them. For it is God who's at work in you, both doing what he desires for his good pleasure, right? These scriptures are setting the mark, setting the tone for us to understand that we are being melded, shaped into the image of God. And this is incredibly important because what really should be put in context, it wasn't all the way off, but a little leavens the whole lump.
Right.
So when you say sin separates, it's not from God, because nothing can separate you from the love of God, and God is love, right? So you and God have been united. There is therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, right? So all these scriptures and understanding God's nature and character, I can't think that God has left me somewhere.
Yep.
Like, because no,
Just think about it.
just think about it. Pause for a second. He couldn't have left me somewhere. However, to be more clear, if I understand that God has me on a journey somewhere, that it's not just a relationship, but it's a relationship in which we are going in a direction, that we are going on a path, that when I got in relationship with God, when God redeemed my life, snatched me out of darkness, that truthfully he did it because there is a work for me.
That's good.
And he is now working on me for what he's working for me.
That's good.
And so he works in me for what he's working for me on, right? So so that what he's doing in me, I can walk in what he has for me.
Right.
And so when you start to see it that way, but understand this, that once again, going back to that, nothing can separate you from the love of God.
Right.
Like, so God doesn't, he's faithful to continue this work.
Yeah.
So God never gives up on the work.
Yeah.
So because it's his work.
Because I just want to add this, because even as we reflect, and we can do this together, as I reflect over the Bible, all the characters that we're introduced to in the Bible, there's a lot of them sinned. A lot of them missed the mark. A lot of them did things. But how many did God walk away from?
Right. And so none. That's
none.
the truth, right? And that's what I love. Even earlier on in Romans, I believe it's Romans chapter 4, that like Paul even made it clear then,
right,
that like, no, God was redeeming them long ago.
Right.
He was redeeming your forefathers. He goes through and tells them, these guys were never perfect. He was redeeming them then.
Right.
He's redeeming now. Saying that to say, and you said something that's also so important. You said missing the mark. Once again, this is letting me know, wait, there's a mark. Right? There's an aim, there's an outcome to my relationship.
Right.
That there is a target, a mark. And these become so important to ground sin's impact on your relationship with God. Right? That God, you and God are not stagnant.
Right. Okay.
You and God are not stagnant. You are in a dynamic relationship with God. That's what those scriptures are describing, that you and God are in a dynamic, evolving, growing relationship, right? That God, he gives you his spirit, so you have the power and the understanding of what he's doing, so that you are about what? Your Father's business.
Yeah.
So what does that mean when we start to look into it? When we're putting context around the statement of sin separates you, it can absolutely separate you from that work.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's simply a decision not to do
Right.
that work.
Right.
And so there's a work, and I cannot be doing it.
Right.
There's a mark that God has for me, and I can absolutely not be hitting it. This is true.
Yeah. I can see that. We can find that in the Bible, right?
But does God stop pointing me towards it?
Nope.
No. Does he start drawing me towards it? No.
Right.
Does he stop loving me so that I can get up off my feet and continue towards it? Absolutely not.
Right. Yeah.
But you can be in a season where you are not moving towards this mark at a rate of efficiency
Yeah.
that you could.
Right. Right.
Right?
I'm thinking about the we learn about King Saul, right? We know King Saul was called, he was chosen, God was with him, he was graced for the assignment, and King Saul made decisions that were underneath or missed the mark that God called him to, right? And but God was with him.
Yeah.
God was with him the whole time. There were some promises that were made to Saul that were still irrevocable, right? You messed this up, but I'm going to still do what I said I'm going to do. God and Saul have that type of conversation. But we can all count the number of people that we read about in the Bible who lived beneath where God called them or lived beneath God's standard, and yet God still graced them, to do what it is that they were doing.
Right, because what we also can never underscore is the mercy of God.
That's right.
And I believe that that's the part to where, we have to understand that there's mercy available for the believer. What is mercy? That's the punishment you deserved and did not get. And goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. And so you even struggle, right? And I say this because many people, you're like, man, I'm trying to understand. We know sin has consequences.
Yeah.
We know that there are repercussions to doing bad things. And I say, you're right. That's not disputable. However, what's also not disputable, what's also not debatable is the mercy of God.
Right.
And so you have to balance sin's consequences in the face of God's mercy, which lets me know that if I'm facing the consequences of a sin decision I've made, it's only because it's able to work me towards God's good.
That's good.
Right? Like, because God's agenda doesn't stop.
Say that again. Say that
if
again.
I am facing
Right.
the consequences of sin,
I'm facing something that I don't want. Right.
Because God was like, mercy is not your portion this
That's
time.
good.
He allowed it to happen, didn't cause it.
Right.
Because I made the decision.
Right.
But he allowed it to happen. It's only because this is going to working together for good he has for me.
Right.
Me facing this, me going through this consequence, me having to deal with the bad I may have caused by a decision I've made that God didn't extend his mercy to cover for, lets me know that this is working together for the good he's taking me towards.
That's good.
That this does not stand. These consequences do not stand outside of God's agenda to progress me into a work.
That's good. He'll use it. And then that highlights all of the equipment that God has given us to deal. When you talk about the strength to persevere, in perseverance, endurance, the ability to stand fast in the difficult times of life, God has given us equipment. He's graced us with the ability to stand.
You will not be tempted, tried, or what you are bear to withstand, and with it I will make a way of escape.
Yeah.
So if I'm facing it, God has already equipped me to overcome it.
Right.
Man, but a lot of times our equipment
Right.
that we have ain't processed
We're not
it yet.
We haven't processed it yet. Okay. We haven't employed it. You ain't put it in the game.
We
yet.
ain't put it in the game yet. We ain't put it in the game.
This, which leads me to this thought, and I've heard you talk about this before. I think it'll be a good place to talk about it again. Talk about, because sometimes we have a tendency to get comfortable living in mercy, and we misunderstand, or we put a wrong definition on a season of mercy. Like where you are, you're living in mercy. This isn't where he's trying to get you to be. You're just living in mercy right now.
Absolutely. Right. That in the words of Paul, right, frustrating grace.
Right.
I always think of Jesus, and he said no more bread.
Yeah.
And other words, they were misinterpreting the miracle.
Right.
They like he was saying, no, like I'm not trying to turn you guys into what is a good way to say this? You're not supposed to be using this as the supply.
Right.
You're supposed to see this as application for your own walk.
Yeah.
Right. This miracle is supposed to bring you closer to God.
Man.
And this miracle is supposed to bring you into an understanding of who he is.
Yeah.
But you are using it.
Bring it home.
Like
Right.
you are using what was supposed to be a building block
Yep.
as home base.
Exactly.
And
How many people, and as I reflect over my own life, how many moments did you go along with what you knew was less than what God was calling you to? You did it anyway, right? Because you knew grace is going to get you out, or God's going to get you out. If he delivered me from my past bad decision, he can deliver me from this current bad decision that I'm about to make, right?
Listen, and a lot of times we can even cushion. Right, what we determine is the cushion, or what we determine is the necessary padding. Right, like we self-insulate. Right, like we'll be like, okay, well I'm gonna go ahead and continue doing this because I know I have enough insulation to be ignorant for some time. Right. I know it's clearly needs to be done, but I know I can survive. 3 months, 4 months. I got some insulation, right? And I'm gonna work it.
And I'm thinking now, how dangerous is that game to play, right? Because the majority of us have seen the results of taking it too far, or we've seen in other people who you stay too close to the fire, and God still loves you there. God will still use you there, but the truth is, may not be like the way where he was leading you to before, but he can still use you. He'll still love you. But I think that, whether it be through family or people that we've come in contact with, we've seen people who, man, you played with that thing too long. And now there's, I don't want to say it in this conversation, but almost irrevocable damage in reference to natural things that, man, you've gone so far away from God's intent and what he was wanting to do.
Yeah. I would say like this, right? How would someone see or understand that they could potentially be in a season where mercy is carrying them forward? Yeah. Is you understand that at the end of the day, God is not just directing you without all of his promises being true to you. In other words, that when God, I like to say this, God's directions are an all-inclusive package. They include peace. They include joy. They include hope, right? And a lot of times what we experience isn't failure, but what we experience is a lack of peace. Right? Because a part of God's way or God's plan was for peace to be your portion, for joy to be your portion. So it isn't that you have failed, or it isn't that you have, let's say, lost that car. It isn't that you've lost that house. It isn't that you've lost that job. It isn't that you lost that relationship. You just aren't experiencing peace in it. You're not experiencing joy in it. Like, you're not seeing the qualities that come with following, although you haven't failed yet. Right. And so a lot of times that's what we experience. If I was trying to help somebody identify, it was like, man, I'm really running this thing thin.
There we go.
But and you're like, yeah, you haven't failed. Right. But are you really experiencing peace right now?
That's
like,
good.
No. Like, I haven't felt peace in a while.
You're ignoring the indicators.
You're
ignoring the flashing light is I have no peace doing this, but you're ignoring the things that God
it hasn't broke down.
Because it hasn't broke down.
And God's like, boy, I'm like, mercy is keeping you. Like you are being kept.
Yeah.
But I'm extending this season and you're feeling it.
Yeah. I want to bring back in something you said earlier. Grace isn't intended to make sin comfortable.
Right.
Because I keep imagining the person who, I'm gonna just make it plain. Like, you should not be smoking. You quit. You so-called quit a long time ago, and you praise God, and it's a part of your testimony. But every now and then, when situation gets tough, you go back to something that you were clearly delivered from. But the reality is, and what you can really see, you know people who took a hit of the wrong thing at the wrong time, and they ain't quite recovered yet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we know folks who, man, they smoked that and they shouldn't have, and they still stuck, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, well, to repeat what was said, grace isn't to make sin comfortable. His mercy isn't to cause us to get comfortable living beneath the standard.
Yeah, grace makes redemption possible.
That's good.
Right? Like, grace makes recovery possible.
Right.
These words are important.
Yes.
Grace makes eternity your portion. But however, man, if you're talking about and I love to say it like this too, that altitudes and atmospheres, grace makes the altitude possible. Sin makes the atmosphere survivable. Right? Like what is that atmosphere? Right? Like what is the atmosphere? That you can rise to an altitude, you can get to a mountaintop, but who you're with, what's the air like? And sin will make a mountaintop feel like a valley. Right. Like, because it's an atmosphere controller. Right. Like, because sin will create, man, you are redeemed from these thoughts. You have truth that helps you with these thoughts. However, sin will cultivate shame. Sin will cultivate the thoughts of failure, right? It will do that. But this is all mentality. This isn't reality. Right. Like, and so your mental state isn't as healthy as it could be, although you're experiencing this mountaintop moment.
Yeah.
And so it's like your grace makes the mountaintop possible, but sin will make the atmosphere on that mountain disturbing. Right? Like, and it's not God's problem. It's happening here. Right? Like it's the accusations only feel threatening when you're guilty of what they're accusing you of.
That's good. That's right.
And nobody, I know we always use this example of being in a courtroom. And yes, right, but no one likes going to trial. Like it's not a comfortable place, even when they have no evidence. The courtroom isn't comfortable.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying. So Jesus is getting you off, but sin brings you to the courtroom to receive acquittal. Right, but no one likes the courtroom. No one wants to go there.
Right.
You don't want to be there. Yes, there's the blood is redeeming all that they're trying to convict you of, but who wants to sit in court?
Right, that's good. Yeah, I just think about riding on the interstate, and it don't matter if you're going faster than the speed limit or at the speed limit or below the speed limit. When you see the police car, everybody slows down.
Everybody slows down. It's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable. And man, that's a good point. There's something that I want you to talk about too. On Sunday, you mentioned how sin is a reality, right? And just helping again reestablish that when we talk about sin, we're not talking about isolated behaviors, but sin is a reality. Yeah. Let's go into that some.
That is huge. And I would say, once again, we're talking about, man, how do we communicate with clarity so that we can be not just disciple, but disciple makers, right? So that we can be messengers of this gospel. Man, for you to start to communicate and understand that, first of all, grace is a reality. To understand that sin is a reality, is more than an act, it's a reality, helps communicate clearly what is happening, how sin impacts us in a grace dispensation. Because what we know that the reality is false. It's false, it's dead, it's done. However, there are people still living in it, walking around today.
Right.
Right. But it speaks to what we were just saying when we're saying, well, no, like, you're getting acquitted, but you're still having to sit in a courtroom, right? Because there's a reality to this. There's emotions, there's fears, there's accusations that accompany this reality. There are, obviously I always see things so visual. And so I'm like, man, we speak about virtual reality, right? And I know even these things are become so real that you have people that they're wearing the goggles, right? I can't think of the name of them, but like the meta glasses, and you can be in a living room and you put on the glasses and you have to help people because they'll start walking into walls because they're seeing what's in front of them and they're forgetting, like, no, you're in a house. That's still right. Like you're in this house, but what you're seeing because of what the reality that you're focused on, that you're living in, you've lost touch of the room that you're in. Right. So here you're in this dispensation of grace, and sin is like putting on those reality goggles in this dispensation. You're seeing things, you're hearing things that they're not real. If you take the goggles off, you'll realize that, like, I'm still at home.
Grace.
I'm still in grace. But now you put this, you entered into this world, because it's not just an act, right? That it is a pool. And that's what the Bible says, that it's not only, that's what we said on Sunday, it's saying that it has lustful devices, that it's sin is centered in lust, it's empowered by perversion, it's self-centered, that it's like all of these attributes are a part of sin, right? Like, so when you're not just doing a thing, you're saying yes to either some selfish nature, you're saying yes to some form of perversion, you're saying yes to some form of lust, that you're thinking of an act, but you're actually inviting in a whole reality, a whole world, and but imagine yourself, by doing the act, you're putting on the goggles.
You're putting on the goggles that make it seem more real to you.
Seem more real.
So I'm imagining, like, I would think that the general thought is something like, God is just trying to stop me from doing bad things. Like God is, I imagine a person, they're processing their relationship with God. And on a surface level, they just see that, man, God just don't want me to do these bad things. God wants me to do these right things. And that's a very surface level view.
Very surface level view.
God is wanting you to live in the truth or the reality of his grace. God is not wanting you to live in the reality of sin. Like that's the deeper.
There we go. That's
Okay.
the deeper thought. So it's that's the understanding that no, it's not just an act.
Right.
It's the invitation of a reality
Right.
that you'll have to fight off. That you'll have to, that these accusations, like say you're going to court, you're being acquitted, so you still have to go to court. That you're having to continually, man, I'm gonna say it this way, not just nurture your soul, you're having to replenish your soul. Right? That sin attacks your soul. And so like I said, you're not just having to nurture you're not nurturing your soul through prayer. You are actually having to replenish yourself because sin is depleting you of righteous qualities,
Right.
because sin is fueled by lust.
Right.
And so you are taking in this reality, you're taking it in, like you say, you're just thinking,
So we can still be heard, it looks like, but
Okay,
I'm not sure
we're not
what
seeing-
happened to the picture.
we're not seeing, but
Right.
so listen, Pastor Mar, we'll be here on Thursday.
Okay.
And
We'll
so
be
we
here on Thursday.
So if the video is into this,
No visual.
there's no visual. No, we'll pick it up. We've been here for an hour. No, we haven't, because we didn't start at one.
Yeah, it's been about 40 minutes or so.
Okay.
Yep, 40 minutes.
And so we could close here. But
All right.
I would say this in closing. I would say that it is, and I love this, 'cause I'll say it like this, 2 Corinthians 3:18, right? But we all with unveiled faces. What is that saying? Looking as in a mirror at the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. Unveiled faces. In other words, saying that there is nothing between
Right.
me taking in God, that there's nothing there. Well, we know that veil was the law. That veil was the consciousness of sin. That veil is what kept people from seeing their true identity in Christ. It's a reality, right? That veil, for the sake of our example, would be putting on these goggles, putting on these virtual reality goggles inside of this dispensation of grace. Your face is veiled.
Yeah.
Right? Like the veil has been lifted, but you have reapplied it.
Right.
And just trying to give people a clear understanding of like, yes or no, we do not I like to say it like this. We understand that we aren't going to be sin free, but we should be sinning less.
Like
sinning less. Why? Because man, it's not just an act. It's a reality. It's a reality in which I've been redeemed from. It's a state of living in which I have been redeemed from. It's an veiled identity to who I'm truly am. It's it blocks my
And let
true
me add
identity.
this too.
Right?
So we're not like the aim or the focus isn't being sin free, but sinning less. What that also says to me, it's not about us being so sin conscious, but God conscious. Like just being more conscious of the relationship that you have with Him instead of being focused on the do's and the don'ts or the rights and the wrong.
Right.
No, I'm God conscious. I'm
Right.
focused on our relationship.
Right? Because I'm being formed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what we started with, saying like,
That's good.
no, let's start this conversation with focusing on what God is doing.
That's good. Right.
God is spiritually forming me. God has a mark he set for me. And man, sin is putting on I know they can't see me, but
A veil.
putting on a veil while I'm throwing darts at a target.
Right.
Like you know, and we're saying no, like, but first of all, man, we got it's about